it doesn't matter where you're from. There's been a couple different programs or efforts to try to, okay, once there's a successful company, let's go bring in an American CEO or bring in somebody from the UK or, and they'll take it and run with it. I think it can work, but I really don't think that's necessary. I really believe that, becoming a good communicator and a presenter and these kind of skills can definitely be taught.
Welcome to another episode of Inside the Vacuum. This is a podcast where we talk to founders, people working in the startup and fintech industry about how it is working in the vacuum of space and time, trying to build something cool and exciting. And I'm really, really excited today to have Mary Alcantara. Is that the right way to say the name?
Yeah, perfect.
Welcome, Mary. Mary is the Deputy Managing Director of MKB Fintechlab.
That's right. Thanks, Marcel. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. So first of all, for those who don't know MKB, and more specifically the MKB Fintechlab, can you tell us more about what it is and what it is you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So MKB is a top 5 bank here in Hungary. We just have a presence in Hungary for the time being. We specialize in the premium banking and corporate segments. So that's where we're traditionally strong. We're not as big as some of the other banks in Hungary, but we're strong in those segments. MKB Fintechlab is our innovation lab and design competence center. It's an external company, 100% owned by MKB Bank. And we were founded in 2016 really to be kind of the open innovation arm for the bank. So to explore what is this topic of fintech, how to bring in the latest innovations and really talents to the MKB group and MKB ecosystem. Over the past few years, we've built up a big community around us. Really, we think that's part of our responsibility and our mission. We want to build up Budapest as a fintech capital in the CE region and beyond. And to do that, we've had a few different kinds of tools and initiatives. So I think we're the most famously known for our Startup Accelerator program. We did that for 3 years in a row. We had 3 batches, basically kind of your typical startup accelerator. So we did investments of around 25,000 euros into 6 to 8 companies per year. The first year we started focusing mainly in Hungary. So we just looked at Hungarian companies. And then the second year we took it out to the region. And then in the third year, we expanded it throughout Europe. And we even had companies from London and Estonia joining our program. This year, however, we decided to kind of take a step back and look at the success and the things that we achieved and kind of, take stock of everything that we've done. There's some other things that happened for Fintechlab, which I think are kind of interesting. So our managing director was promoted up 2 levels and went back inside MKB Bank as a director for digital business. And with that, Fintechlab's purpose remains the same, but our focus, we're shifting a little bit more now to focus on MKB and how we can bring in these tools and innovations and mindset to really transform the whole organization. MKB had a big transformation project in 2017 on the technology side. So we integrated Oracle's FlexCube and replaced the core banking system with that. But what we realized is that transformation is more than about just technology. It's really about the people and the culture and the mindsets. And so we decided that Fintechlab would be a great organization to help in some of the softer side of that transformation process. So with that, we've kind of revamped our startup program, and we're not doing it batch style anymore. We wanted to have an opportunity to work with startups all throughout the year. So it happened a few times that we met some great company right after our program ended, and it was like, okay, well, see you next year, or let's see what we can do in the meantime. So this gives us a chance to basically work with startups all throughout the year. And we're only taking companies that have already demonstrated their product. They have some references already. So we don't really want to be the first customer anymore because it takes a lot. It's just a lot of risk for the bank to take on. It's a lot of effort to kind of, co-build something together. We are interested in doing that and we want to come back to that. But in terms of, really bringing in the latest innovations, we think it's a little bit easier and better if we work with a company that has kind of done this before, where it's a right cultural fit, they have some experience, and then we can move quickly together. So we just had our first successful pilot launching. Maybe I should find somewhere else to go here. We integrated a digital queuing solution called Linistry. We just did a pilot. It's ending later this month in 4 branches so far. And already there was some great feedback and success on that project. And we're discussing the details about how we're going to roll it out throughout the entire bank branch network. So that was a huge success under the scope of this new program concept. Yeah, that's, I guess, kind of, I dove right in. That's a bit of a overview of Fintechlab and the startup program, which I'm running. Other than that, at Fintechlab, my role is to support our managing director in developing the vision and the strategy for the whole organization. Aside from working with startups, we do a lot of educational activities in the community, and we have several events that we do throughout the year based on topics that are interesting to us. We care a lot about working with partners and bringing in the best talent and knowledge and thought leaders and trying to explore these things together, because on the bleeding edge of innovation, not everything's figured out, and that's what makes it exciting. And I think it's really important to collaborate as much as possible.
So these times are very different than what we sort of expected them to be. You might have had plans for this year, you might have had things that you wanted to do, but they weren't possible now because we're all now in lockdown. So do you see this as an opportunity for certain types of startups or certain types of fintech startups to be on the rise, or is it just business as usual?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in every crisis or in every challenge, there's an opportunity. And I wouldn't say it that, it's such a great time to work on, I would call it more of the silver lining of the crisis rather than, this is so great that it's paved the way, because I think there's a lot of tough times ahead of us. But I think, one of the silver linings of that is that so it's really increased the pace of digitalization. So I think any startup that is helping to bring a traditionally, manual or analog service online is well positioned right now to really get some momentum and run with that. Banks especially, are looking for ways to digitize their services for their customers. That's definitely one of the top focus areas. Also, with kind of adjacent to that, I would say is anything that provides a contactless or low touch experience for a customer. So contactless payments, I think, are going to be really big. And then even traditional, so outside of fintech, e-tail, delivery services, we've seen like a huge ramp up in those kinds of solutions as well.
What about your portfolio? Are you now seeing things that you invested in the past that are now having a comeback during this situation, or after years of working with them, they're now coming back with, we fixed a lot of things or pivoted or changed things? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great question. So one of our portfolio companies is a online mortgage solution called Hipomo. And I think they were ahead of the times, really, in what they're trying to do. And I haven't talked to them actually recently, but I'm assuming that the momentum for them must be accelerating at this point, because I think what we're also seeing is a little bit of not a relaxation, but a bit more of an understanding on the regulatory side. So things that previously needed to be done in person or with the utmost sort of security measures, there's an understanding now that, practicality matters, and we're just not going to be able to move forward unless we can accept, a slightly, less high standard for, things like digital signatures. So I think that's also an area where I think there's a lot, pretty much everybody made a quick jump to a digital signature solution. And we've talked to lots of partners who've done that. That's kind of a low hanging fruit of something you can do right away to dive to kind of take that one step towards making your day-to-day operations a little bit smoother in this new situation. We have another company called Paintech that has they do factoring for SMEs. And I think they're seeing a big uptick right now in their services because everybody needs liquidity at this time. So there's a lot of businesses that, are going to need some some kind of financing, bridge financing to get through these times. So I think they're seeing a big uptake right now. They put together a really nice guide about resources for companies during the COVID-19 crisis. So I think they've been doing a great job kind of responding to the situation and trying to, to be available as a resource for companies in this time. That's really, one of the space that they were focusing on in the first place.
Are you seeing a change in policies or companies now adopting projects which might have been put on hold?
I'm not sure about things that were on hold or being brought back, but I know that, for example, the Linistry project that I just mentioned, the digital queuing, that was definitely fast-tracked because of the situation. MKB also rolled out a video banking service in record time in response to the crisis. So that was in the plan, but yeah, I would say things that were kind of longer-term strategic projects now became really short-term kind of essential projects.
If we put the crisis outside of the conversation for a moment, what is it that you look for in fintechs when you're either investing in them or helping them out, mentoring them? What is it that makes you say, yes, this is where I want to either commit my time or my money?
I think first and foremost, I'm looking for a chemistry fit. I think across the board, most investors agree that the team is the most important. So within that, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of factors. So it's kind of what experience does that team have? Why should, even if you love the idea, why should those particular founders be the ones to actually make it happen? How can you believe in them? But then even aside from their professional experience, I think it's really important to how coachable are they? How open are they to feedback? Is it, are they willing to accept other inputs? Are they willing to disagree and kind of rumble about certain topics and actually, pivot and change their direction? I think you see a lot of startups fail because the founders are too married to their original idea and not necessarily willing to, be open to what the market feedback is telling them. So I think that, this kind of coachability, openness, humbleness is really important to me personally. And then aside from that, for Fintechlab in particular, we have another really important factor that, is there interest from the side of the bank? So do we see, is this solution actually meeting a defined need that we have? Can we find a champion, an internal sponsor within the MKB group that is going to be excited about this project and passionate about it and really take it to the next level? That's something we've learned time and time again. I think we've built that into our process now. So no startup goes farther than, the interview phase until we have that kind of alignment and support and buy-in from the bank. So yeah, I would say those two things are the most important. Having a great team that's, open to feedback, really flexible. They can answer all the tough questions. They know how to pitch. I think pitching is also really important, and just being kind of consultative and able to discuss, what it is about their solution that can be adapted, how they're meeting all of the kind of cloud-based requirements, know your customer, all these kind of regulatory aspects. They need to be able to have a response to that. And then the other side of that is, having somebody inside the bank that is really going to, care about this project and help us drive it on the other side.
Gotcha. So it's a mixture of both the team, but also how can this help MKB as a whole succeed rather than a regular accelerator would do, which might be much more broader in its scope.
Absolutely. I would say though, I do want to add one thing to that, I guess, which is that we succeeded in having the bank invest into 2 startups in our third batch that were dealing with cryptocurrencies. And I think I personally feel proud of that achievement because I do think that that's part of our role as well. So, we have this kind of constant, we want to find solutions that are going to be relevant right now in the short term that we can integrate into the bank and really build value together. Absolutely. I think that's the main focus. But I think aside to that, I think it's also important. I think Fintechlab and this kind of smaller, accelerator style, pre-seed, seed investment, a great use of that funds is to be kind of a hedge. So investing in crypto, even if you don't believe in it, I think we have many colleagues who don't necessarily subscribe to that or think that it's going to, go anywhere, or they feel it's very speculative, the kind of typical critiques. I think it's important to I think I'm proud that we got that, the bank has, a few placements into this industry just because who knows, right? And I think it's great to have part of that as a hedge about, who knows what's going to happen in the future. If, Bitcoin takes off again, or if crypto, takes over the world, then we're in a good position as
well. Absolutely. So it's a little more forward facing with the crypto and generally blockchain technology. It's something that there's a lot of regulatory questions around it. How do we actually manage it? We saw Facebook trying to get into it and they got stamped on completely by governments around the world. So we'll see how that turns out, but it's definitely something to explore and look into as it was 10 years ago when all of these big startups that we saw like Spotify and Airbnb, they got started right after their last recession. So it's still not unclear what those industries will be that will be boosted by this crisis here. So you've been at MKB Fintechlab for the past 2.5 years, 3 years, but before that you were already working with startups, right? You were helping, if I remember from our last conversation, you were helping startups sort of get into the Hungarian ecosystem and the Hungarian startup scene. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I did my MBA here in Budapest. I went to Central European University, and through the program there, we had a course on entrepreneurship, and we had basically a startup idea. We had an innovative calendaring solution that we launched with a couple of my classmates, and that was kind of my first foray into the startup world. And we decided, we barely launched before we panicked and kind of convinced ourselves that this is never going to work. But we had gotten so far as to talk to some local developers about possibly building out, an MVP version of it. And we started working with them really on a barter basis. So, they were teaching us about product development and sprints and how to be agile. And we were helping them with their sales and marketing materials. They were just negotiating their first big contract in the US. And I think, we were sort of the token American girls on the phone call that kind of lended them a little bit of credibility. And we made sure everything was, tip-top English and professional. And that sale went through. I really don't take a lot of credit for it. I think, we were just kind of the icing on the cake. They did a great job. They found the client themselves and everything. But from that project, we kind of we started getting a lot of phone calls. Just, hey, are you the ones, helping everybody do sales in the US? And we kind of said, okay, let's run with this. So we did that. My partner, Lanny Moore, and I, and she's based in New York. I'm based here in Budapest. We started a kind of 2 geography consulting business where we supported, in the first place, Hungarian startups and tech companies that were trying to access the US market, just because, by default, we had a stronger network than the average Hungarian just by being from the States. We were able to actually reach surprisingly high levels of people. So we worked with the company that was had a solution for the deaf community. It was like a travel-based solution and they wanted to have a pretty high-profile partner, and we managed to get Let's Go Travel on board. So just kind of, through friend of a friend of a friend. So we did a lot of that the first few years of our business, just kind of making connections and helping people do business development and sales in the US, and that was pretty successful. And then we transitioned to, on stateside, we had some clients that we worked with more on a traditional kind of management consulting basis, mostly growth stage companies looking to get to the next level, and usually by using some sort of technology. So either it was something custom built or some sort of a service that we heard about or knew about, and we would try to source that from Hungary wherever possible. So that's kind of the 2 sides of our business. We still actually work together on projects on a case-by-case basis. So my main project right now is Fintechlab, and my partner is working on a IoT startup with her fiance. But we're still open for mentoring, and we still do a lot of projects, with companies that come across our network. Yeah, so that's a little bit about that side. I guess, aside from Fintechlab in Hungary, I'm also working with the Hungarian government program called Input, basically under that same banner. So helping Hungarian startups that are looking to go outside, helping them prepare for an international market launch, helping them, with their pitch presentations. So that's kind of, I think for us, we're really excited about I think it's an exciting time to be in Hungary. There's a lot of innovation happening here. It's a smaller market, but it's really passionate, and the players here, I think it's maturing rapidly, and it's an exciting time to kind of be here and support that. Do we need to re-record any of that? I mean, my kids just
I don't think so. I think it's very subtle in the background.
Okay, good. Yeah, it feels
fine.
Loud to me, but just
yes, I had the same. I had the same thing with my daughter yesterday. I was also recording an interview, and she just randomly ran in here and was just shouting at me. So it feels much louder.
I don't care if it's a normal call, but if it's we're trying to record a podcast, so whatever. I think people get it. I mean, everybody's been very understanding. So this is nice.
It's also very real. It's very real now. Like sometimes you try to be too official, too planned out, and actually comes out sounding very forced, very unnatural. And I think the fact that people are now working from home, it's a little bit more personal.
It's actually, it's really nice because so even before all of this, I used to work from home a few days a week just to spend more time with my kids and, be here and not have to save time traveling. And now I do feel more free, like, okay, everybody knows that everybody's home with their kids. So I don't feel like I have to like hide them or shush them as much. It's just like, they join in, they say hello a little bit, and, you feel a little bit more, you get the whole package, I guess.
Absolutely. It's really interesting because it's almost like we were maybe a little too over the top with the officialness everywhere, and everything trying to be very, very polished. And it's really, I don't know whether you're aware, but one of the fastest growing social networks right now is TikTok, which started off with teens. It started off with fairly young audience, the same Facebook did and Instagram did. It started off very young and it sort of ages up. TikTok is all about things that are absolutely not overproduced. I mean, there are people who do very well produced, animated and edited videos. Those take time. But the people that can just start growing very quickly are just people just try to do cool things with the camera they have right here on their phone. So it's very exciting to see that, we're still remain human as people and really enjoy authentic and raw things as opposed to just highly polished, beautiful things, which people almost are not scared of, but they almost see like there might be something behind it if it's too official, too polished. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was reading this article the other day about we have this unique opportunity now with the crisis that, when things go back to normal, whatever the normal is, I think it's going to be a new normal. So I don't think we're ever going to go back to the same. But we have this chance now to really be thoughtful and mindful about, well, what do we want to take away with us from this experience? And I really hope that's one of the things that stays, that, okay, this is my home. Like, here's my, plant back here in my fridge, and there's some bike frames on the wall. And that's because my husband is really into bikes. And that's something that's part of me and part of my story. And I think it's nice to be able to just share that. I think you get to this a little bit more personal, meaningful level. And we don't feel like we have to hide behind this wall of professionalism or, having a really polished, kind of facade for the world. I think, let's just try to, let's let
make a very official background. Or I can be on the Star Trek Enterprise,
like, let's show our personalities and let's kind of relax and have good conversations and not worry so much about, okay, is the audio quality perfect, or is there, a naked child running through the background?
So what have you, you've been here, you said a decade now, and what's the biggest difference for you, like coming in from the American lifestyle or whatever it is? And this was California, right?
Yeah, so I grew up in California, and then I went to school in Boston, and I lived in New York for 2 years. So I have kind of a East Coast, West Coast experience. And then, being here the last 10 years. So I make it back to the States probably once or twice a year for an extended trip. So, having my own business and being able to kind of do a lot of my projects remotely, I've been able to manage that, which is really nice. I don't think I would have been able to stay here so long if I didn't make it back to see my family periodically. But it's nice too, because I always stop by New York. I think there's a big, it's kind of just cool I really feel like it's one of those places where things happen there first. Like, just a small example, like I remember visiting one of my old coworkers, and she was just saying how, she was like, oh yeah, the other day the DJ at my gym was playing this really cool song. And I was like, you have a DJ at your gym? Like, that's crazy. And now you see that, a lot of places like popping up. And this was like years ago. So just kind of like funny, new things happen there a lot. So I think it's, for me, it's important to just kind of pop through there periodically and just see what's going on. It's always really inspiring. Although, don't get me wrong, I hate New York. I hated living there. So I would never want to live there, but as a place to visit, it's a lot of fun. But so one of the things that and this again is a sweeping generalization. So there's of course counterexamples on both sides of this. But one of the things that stood out to me, at least in the startup world, I've been to demo days at accelerator programs in the US and in Hungary and in Slovenia and other countries in Europe too. And one of the things that I noticed just generally, again, is that in the US, we tend to be much better at the storytelling and the marketing and the communication. So we can really make something sound impressive. And then you dig deeper and you have a look at the technology or the prototype, and it's more often than not, it can be just slideware, something that was very carefully crafted to look like it's working, but it's not. And I think here it's almost the opposite. So I think the base level of kind of MVP or very early stage prototype is really functional. So I think a lot of times people can really hack something together that works really quickly, but then they can't talk about it, or it doesn't come across as strongly. If you have the engineer up on stage trying to pitch, looking down at their shoes and just saying, yeah, this is what we launched. We integrated all of these libraries. It's scalable. It works up to, 500,000 users, but these are the problems. And they're just really focused on like the bugs or the issues. And I think, it's just interesting to me because I think there's a lot of technical strength here in this region. And I don't know if it's a confidence thing or a cultural thing or whatever it is, but somehow we're not as good here at believing in it and really selling it and making it and convincing ourselves that it's really, really valid. Whereas in the US, and I mean, this is maybe my own, kind of cultural feeling as kind of a, maybe not a self-hating American, that's too strong, but I tend to just, whenever I meet another American, I kind of am skeptical of them or don't trust them necessarily because I know that we're so good at the bullshit factor, So it's like, I kind of want to weed through that. And this kind of facade that we're talking about too, and just, get down to what's really happening and, how much of this is actually real. Then again, I always kind of hesitate to tell this story because I think a lot of people have strong reactions to this. That doesn't mean that all American entrepreneurs are bullshitty or that no Hungarians are good presenters. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I think just, in general, across the board, that's, the strengths in the US are more around communication. And the strengths here, I think, are really on, the hard kind of technical skills.
Yeah, there's this stereotypical bell curve chart that I'll share with you after this, and I'll put it on the screen. And it's basically a comparison of how an American would rate something as opposed to Eastern European. It's a very stereotypical thing, but and I experienced this once with one of our engineers. We went to a client meeting and we had an hour-long presentation about how cool something was. And this was from a very well-spoken person from a fairly large London-based startup or fintech. And it was, they talked about how exciting it is, how they can do, cool things about with technology and data. And our engineer just basically said, "Oh, it's okay." And so
yeah, exactly.
Like one of my other colleagues was like, what he's actually saying is that he's very, very excited about it, because if it was bad, he would have said, "Oh, this is bullshit." You have, and this might not be Hungarian, this might be sort of almost that sort of Eastern European or Central European mindset of we
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
pride ourselves in the engineering and how well it functions underneath, and we don't get overexcited about things, because I also have that sort of experience of living both in the US and here. So there's a different mindset to it, and it's almost like once you merge the two, once you find a good presenter and you find a good engineer, and it doesn't matter which part of the world they are, because you can say that completely interchangeably, like you said, you actually end up with a very sort of powerful engine. We just come in with the engineers, and that's sort of what we've built our company on. So we completely understand it's very important to have people who think under the hood and try to make it function, as opposed to just make it look good. I'm not saying that one is bigger, better, or worse.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. I think that's a great point. It doesn't matter where you're from. So I really reject the idea that, I think, you've probably seen this too, but there's been a couple different programs or efforts to try to, okay, once there's a successful company, let's go bring in an American CEO or bring in somebody from the UK, or, and they'll take it and run with it. I think it can work, but I really don't think that's necessary. I really believe that, becoming a good communicator and a presenter and these kind of skills can definitely be taught. I think everybody has their kind of natural starting point. So for some people it will be easier than others, for sure. But I think, at the end of the day, it's all about people. And if you can't communicate about what you're doing to your team, to your clients, it's worth for everybody to invest in this. But yeah, I think it's even on the technology, even probably with you guys, if somebody comes in with the idea, like, you still have to be there to translate between the technical people and the business side, and have this consultative approach. And I think I'm sure that's a critical part of your success as a company too, that you guys have been able to do that and have those kinds of conversations. But yeah, so I agree. It's not about where you were born or where you're from. It's just about this mindset that I think can be cultivated anyway. There's another aspect of that, though. Now we're kind of diverging away from, just the communication and setting the culture. But I think there's an interesting journey that a company goes through, though. And sometimes, you reach, when you get to the point where you've met product market fit, who your customer is, and now it's about scaling. Sometimes then it can be beneficial to make a CEO switch. And I think it's a really impressive thing when a founder can see that and not hold on to the control, but just say, okay, you have a choice at that point. Do you want to see your company continue to grow, even if that means maybe you're not the best person to run that growth and take it to the next level? Or do you want to kind of keep it, in your own domain and your own little kingdom? And I mean, everybody always shits on lifestyle businesses, but I think that's great if you can make, I don't think the ultimate goal for every startup or every, entrepreneur should be, a huge IPO in 5 years. That's one pathway, but I think it's totally acceptable to just build a business around doing something that you love and keeping it a size that's manageable for you. But that's also an interesting kind of part of the journey.
Yeah, I think part of it is really that a lot of the hype around startups was driven by VCs, which actually need that,
Scalability.
scalability,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
exponential growth. So yeah, it's easy to talk about lifestyle businesses as a negative thing because, well, you won't be endlessly growing. Like, I have a friend here in Slovakia. He has a small company. I think there's about 5 or 6 of them. And, I think last year in March, he basically said, I'm not taking any more business until March next year because we've agreed on all the clients we'll be working with this year. And we don't want to hire more people to grow. We're happy the way we are. We, each one of us just bought a house. It's completely okay. And I think many founders might feel it's not okay to have such a small business because they want to see that endless growth. And I guess sometimes you have to have that because you cannot, the entire business is built on growth, but you don't have to build the business that way. You can just build it around, like, how does it support me, my family, my colleagues' families? And that's about it. Like, we don't necessarily, and in fact, right now, during these sort of Corona times, it might actually be a viable solution. Those that had these small businesses, they have a lot lower overhead. But that overhead is almost non-existent because, they move away from the office. They're still working with the 4 guys and gals that they started the whole thing with. and they just continue doing it. And, they might lose some business, they might gain some business, but, when you lose business, you're not losing hundreds of thousands or millions of euros, you're losing tens of thousands of euros or even lower. So it's almost like this will be a new opportunity for many people to maybe start that lifestyle business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, exactly what you're saying. I mean, you have to think about what's sustainable for you. And yeah, I think a lot of times the bigger the business, there's a lot more overhead. It's a lot more to maintain. And it's not necessarily, I don't believe in pursuing all out growth as the ultimate end game. And I think that's part of how we got into the 2008 crisis in the first place. So I think, being satisfied with enough and having a kind of emphasis on what's the marginal, what are you giving up to get to that next level? Because it's always a trade-off. Like if you're going to work that much more or grow the company that much more, does that mean you're spending less time at home or whatever it is? Like, and I think being satisfied with enough and with what you have, that can totally be, that doesn't have you forcing to make these kind of trade-offs about, okay, well, what's going to be the best strategy in the long term. Just enjoy your life, and don't make all these kind of compromises that are just really driving after pure growth.
So thinking about the future, where do you think fintech is going to go? Corona will pass maybe sooner, maybe later, but where's the convergence? Where is it all leading now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I have some ideas. I think a lot of people are thinking about this. A lot of people much smarter than I am. I think, we're going to see everything going online. So everything that you thought could only be done in person, there's going to be a solution for that online. We're going to see, I think, things that have already been happening, it's just going to be accelerating. So we're going to think about like, why go into branches at all anymore? What do you even need to do in a branch? What's the point of a bank branch? I think open banking is going to also accelerate as a topic. I think, just thinking about what's the role of banks in society and, what the touch points the bank has with the customer. I think there's a lot of room for you to, perform banking services not through traditional banking channels now. And I think it's an exciting time. There's been a bunch of neobanks disrupting this space even previously. I think those are going to continue to grow. People are going to really think about, well, what do I want to achieve with my money and where's the best way to do that, rather than, okay, which bank should I go to? I don't think that's going to be the default state anymore. But yeah, I think, digitalization for sure is a huge topic. I think we're just going to go in that direction. Everything is going to be able to be done online. Probably there's going to be a period of fraud. So there's going to be difficulties. I think we're going to have kind of a backlash of security issues as a result of this. I think there's always this kind of pendulum swing between security and convenience that we're dealing with on a societal and technological level. Right now the regulation has become a bit more, secure on the security side, but that's being a little bit relaxed in light of the situation. I think we're going to see there's going to be some interesting stories there for sure. But yeah, I think, eventually it's going to catch back up and we're going to be able to do more and more online in a more and more secure way.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, Mary. Thank you so much for taking the time for this. I have one final question for you.
Okay.
If you had to put up a billboard in your hometown, telling the people about something that you've learned in your experience so far, it doesn't have to be fintech, it doesn't have to be business even related, what would you put on that billboard?
This is a good question. I think my answer changes depending on what phase of life I'm in. But I would say right now, my message would be, don't be afraid. So whatever it is, whatever you're dreaming of doing, whatever you feel excited about, whatever you, think that, okay, I always wanted to do this, but I haven't for whatever reason, now is the time, and just dive into it. So, now is a time for experimenting and not worrying about the consequences necessarily. I mean, okay, I guess maybe it's blasé for me to say that with the, secure income and things like that. I know there's a lot of people in really tough situations, but don't be afraid. It's all going to be okay. And you're stronger than you know. And you have the power and creativity within you to make your dreams come true. I guess that sounds cheesy, but I think that's a message a lot of people need to hear right now.
Beautiful, Mary. Thank you so much. Let's put up that billboard sometime. And when people, if people want to find out more about you, find you, and more specifically also find MKB Fintechlab, where should they go?
They can go to our website, fintechlab.hu. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. They can feel free to write to me directly, mary@fintechlab.hu, or find me on LinkedIn and connect. Happy to chat anytime.
Wonderful. Well, have a wonderful rest of the week, Mary. And hopefully we'll meet in person at some point in the next few months, hopefully not years.
Yeah, that's right. We haven't even met yet. It feels like I've already
not in person.
known you forever. Thanks, Marcel.
Wonderful.
It was a blast. Take care.
Yes, it was. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.